Welcome to week 2 of Creating Relationships That You Love. This week we are going to be talking about creating boundaries. This is a really fun topic. However, I am going to breeze through this one relatively quickly. The reason being that this workshop I have found really is much more applicable and is easier to get our heads around and understand on a case-by-case basis. Creating boundaries is highly individualized. It's different for everyone. Some boundaries are temporary, some are permanent, some are hard and fast, some of them are situationally dependent. It really is going to fall on a spectrum differently for everyone. There's some boundaries are minor, some are moderate, some are severe. Some of them really fall more into this category of preferences and expectations that are, again, more fluid, and some are really, again, hard and fast. Some of these are hard no's that are always true. The way that we enforce boundaries is going to be different from person to person. And so this material is content that I really prefer to do with you on a much more one-on-one, case-by-case basis. And so I highly recommend you showing up to the Saturday workshop for this event so that we can really have that live Q&A time and we can really talk about this material as it applies to your situation, because this is so individualized. Having said all of that, of course, we're going to cover creating boundaries. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit first about why they matter and what this can look like. And then I'm going to go straight into these worksheets and I'm going to have you go through these 3 steps, which are going to be pretty simple, pretty quick. And then we're going to apply the material and talk about it when you guys have your one-on-one coaching sessions with me, okay? So, why do boundaries matter? Boundaries matter because they protect our life, protect our energy, they protect our spiritual, our physical, our financial, and our emotional health and well-being. That matters because when we are able to create and draw and enforce boundaries in a healthy way, we're able to create the life that we love. When we don't know how to draw boundaries, this is one of the primary symptoms that I find when I work with people around stress and burnout and emotional exhaustion. So many of them do not understand what creating boundaries means. So many of them do not know or understand how to actually enforce boundaries in a way that is healthy and productive and useful. And so they're constantly in this other murky water of trying to control other humans and get people to do what they want. And they just get so worn out because nobody has ever shown them how this works, what a boundary is, what a boundary is not. What does it mean? How is it useful? How do I enforce a boundary? How do I control this whole process in a way that is actually within my circle of influence and control? And so that's a lot of what I want to teach you. That's why it matters. When we learn to create healthy boundaries, we can actually preserve our energy. We can preserve our finances, our spiritual well-being, our physical health. We have so much more to give. We can parent so much better. We can run our businesses so much smoother. We can create financial wealth and well-being. We can pay off our debt so much faster. We can lose weight so much easier. Everything in our life, we can build relationships that are less stressed, right? We can create so much more positive emotion. We can sidestep negative emotion on a much more regular basis. And that creates all this emotional place for us to play, to adventure, to laugh together, because we're not constantly stuck in this negative stress cycle with our partner. That's powerful. And so this is why creating boundaries matters. We started with managing expectations, and a boundary is a form of an expectation, right? Expectations are built into this. But we're going to talk a little bit about what's the difference between a preference and a boundary as we move forward, because that is an important difference. So what is boundaries? A boundary is a limit. A boundary is a limit that we place on ourselves or on someone else. We place these limits on ourselves and on other people in order to keep good things in our lives and to keep bad things out of our lives. Again, this sounds very simple, but it's important to recognize. I think so many people think about boundaries as a way to keep negative things out, right? Things that are draining, that are negative, that are toxic, that drain our finances, that drain our health, that hurt our bodies. You know, we think about them as walls, right? Walls to keep people out, but a boundary is not a wall. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times Henry Cloud, who wrote the book Boundaries, talks about sometimes boundaries it's more of a gate, right? It can open and close. It lets some things in, but not everything. And so again, there's a lot of fluidity here. This changes, right? Some things are temporary. I might have boundaries around the way my house runs around Christmas time. I might have boundaries around my time or my finances around the holidays, because I know that that's a time I get really depleted. And so I need to have boundaries around some things that otherwise don't normally apply, right? And so this changes. And so you think about it as a way to keep things out that drain your life or that hurt you or impact you in a negative way. But it's also important to think about a boundary as a limit that you set that helps to keep things in, right? That helps to protect my energy, my spiritual well-being, my physical health. It keeps good things in my life, people in my life, and it protects those relationships that nurture me, that build me up, that add to my life. And so it keeps those things in, and it keeps things out that steal your energy, your time, your money, and drain your life. So it's important to think about how it can serve both of those purposes. When you really develop this skill, this ability to protect your most precious resources, your relationships, your time, your money, your energy, this gives you the gift of being able to create a life that you love. It's just like I said before, this gives you the gift of being able to show up as a powerhouse at your jobs and your relationships. You can show up as your best self. And that, when you're showing up in that place, in that space with that kind of energy and enthusiasm and confidence, when you know you've got your own back, when you know how to draw healthy boundaries, it does wonders for your confidence, for your self-image. That impacts your relationships. It impacts the way that you work, and it impacts your job and your career. Confidence is one of those things when you really begin to understand how that relationship you have with yourself is, it will transform your life. But until you really understand how this day to day, it impacts your life day to day in powerful ways, which we can talk about in another workshop too. But for now, just take my word for it. When you begin to develop this relationship with yourself, where you can trust yourself and you know what a badass you are, you will jump into the arena of life with so much more enthusiasm and energy and confidence, and that will impact the results that you get in powerful ways. It allows you to love deeper, it allows you to trust more, parent stronger, to work more efficiently, more effectively. It allows you to have better communication. It helps us to avoid burnout. It helps us to step into our intuition and apply this wisdom so that we can be our best selves, achieve our highest goals, so that we can build relationships that are not strained. It takes away so much of the stress and the negativity when we just know how to create healthy boundaries, and there's no decision fatigue. We don't have to figure out, what do I have to do about this? Oh God, he didn't empty the dishwasher again, or he didn't do that. We don't even have to think about it, because we've already decided in advance what we're gonna do. It's all within our power. It's all within our control to respond. We don't have to worry about the other person. It takes out so much of the stress and the negativity from your relationships, and that in and of itself is powerful. And so those relationships are not based anymore on the strain and the negativity as much as they are based on healthy standards, healthy expectations, healthy communication, and healthy boundaries. That's powerful. And so your spouse will appreciate this in big ways. Okay, that's why boundaries matter. It's a little bit about what they are. And I want to say a little bit too, again, about what they are not. So boundaries are, in the simplest form, what's okay and what's not okay. That's something that you decide in your brain. And like I've already said, it's different from person to person, okay? This is not universal. We get to decide what's okay, what's not okay. Boundaries are limit setting. Yes, we draw boundaries around time. We draw boundaries around money. We may draw boundaries around food or alcohol or cigarettes, right? So we may set limits around those things. Again, physical health, spiritual, financial. Boundaries are about controlling our exposure. Boundaries are about controlling exposure. So my exposure to things in my life. A boundary is not about controlling other people. And I think, again, this is where we get into that really murky water of stress and burnout and negative emotion and frustration, because we don't know how to draw boundaries. And we think in our brain that a boundary is equated somehow to behavior, right? And in the sense it is, because creating the boundary simply happens in your mind. You decide what's okay and what's not okay. What behavior am I okay with in my life? What behavior am I not okay with? So that's a decision you make. But that's not what a boundary is. Not is going over into that person's life and trying to control their behavior. A boundary is not making my mom quit doing that thing that might drive me crazy. My mom just keeps showing up unannounced. A boundary is not forcing your mother to not come to your house and going into her house and taking away the keys and of her car or whatever that might look like. We so often try to manipulate and control and force a person to change. That's not what a boundary is. A boundary is saying, I'm not okay with this behavior, and then everything about enforcing that boundary exists within our life. So it's, what am I going to do? It's what I'm going to do with my life, my money, my time, my house, my door, my body. And so that's the only way that we can keep everything within our own control. I cannot control another person. I can control myself. And so I'm going to explain this to you more as we move through this worksheet. But today, in this introduction to this topic, I just wanted to tell you just in these brief ways what a boundary is and what a boundary is not. A boundary is deciding what's okay and what's not okay. A boundary is absolutely setting a limit. It's not controlling someone else. You've got to understand that. A boundary is not, they are adults, they get to do whatever they're going to get to do. They get to be disrespectful, they get to be inconsiderate. A boundary is not controlling them. A boundary is controlling yourself and how you respond when they do that behavior. Because that is what gives you your power back. That's what keeps you in control. Controlling what you can control. And that's what we're going to talk about as we move forward. So, the last thing I'll say, again, is a boundary is simply making a decision about what's okay and what's not okay. You might communicate a boundary, and you might not communicate a boundary. There are some boundaries that I do not communicate. I simply take action, right? I don't feel the need to communicate to someone that they are not allowed to hit my body. For the most part, I figure that's kind of a given. And if it's not, I'm not even going to waste my breath having a conversation about that with someone. That's a hard no for me. So if that happens, I decide immediately what I'm going to do. If you hit my body, I'm going to call the police, right? Or I'm never going to be around you again. Like, done, out, see you later. If my boss sexually harasses me, I'm not coming to work tomorrow. I'm not working at that job anymore. And again, we each get to decide how we're going to approach it. But that all is going to remain within our own circle of control and influence. We're not going to allow ourselves to go into this other area of trying to control them. And I'm going to help you with that as we go through the worksheet and as we work with this one-on-one. I'm going to help you see the differences. And that's just something that's really important to pay attention to you. Are you in your lane or are you in their lane? So enforcing a boundary is taking an action on my part. It can range from mild to severe, right? Consequence might be a small consequence, or it might be a big consequence, the action that I decide to take. And that's all going to depend on you. There's no right or wrong there, okay? So that's the introduction, and I want you guys to go ahead, or I'm going to invite you to go ahead and pull up the worksheet, and from here we're going to dive into creating boundaries, and I'm going to walk you through the 3 steps to deciding on what your boundaries are going to be and how we're going to enforce them and what that looks like. Okay, I'll see you guys inside.